everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for our webinar today on field robotics. My name is Nikki Rousseau. I'm the CEO of Robotics Australia Group, and I'd like to just begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, wherever you're in Australia. I pay my respects to the elders past and present. I extend that respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people here today as well. My introduction is very short and brief. As I said, I'm the CEO of Robotics Australia Group. We actually have our board members each having a turn to host the webinars so that you can get to know them as well and know who the people are behind me and helping me in my roles. Today, I'd like to introduce Dr. John Vial, who's based in West Australia. John, we're not going to hold that against you, but herewith, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you, Nikki. G'day. Hey, I'm John Vial, based over in WA, Perth, in the robotics industry, playing around with robots in mining and in oil and gas, and it's pretty cool. Helping build a magnetorobot with Nexus, as well as some of the in the past I've helped with some of the mining autonomous vehicle robots and so on. But today I'm here in the role of board member for RAG, Robotics Australia Group. Just to give you a quick overview of Robotics Australia Group before we get into it. And also, by the way, I'll be sort of sharing the sort of what's going to largely be a panel discussion. Robotics Australia Group is the peak body for robotics in Australia. We have 30 members. Our members are companies. Some of our sort of most notable supporters are companies like Lang O'Rourke, Advanced Navigation, and RSM. And what we really exist to help support and build up the robotics ecosystem in Australia, as well as representing robotics industry to government. And we've been particularly successful at this. We've been putting forward to government the robotics strategy. And Minister Husick last week actually complimented our chair, Sue Key, as being really critical in helping to drive forward the national robotics strategy. That's been really cool. And these sorts of webinars, sort of what we do to try and help build and connect people across Australia so we can have a thriving robotics ecosystem. But that's the short little spiel about Robotics Australia Group. What I'd like to do is to hand over the microphone to our lovely panel members today, and also to give everybody listening a bit of a sort of an overview of what we're going to do. I'm going to give each panel member a little bit of time to introduce themselves, introduce their company, and talk about what they do that's interesting. And I encourage you, if you're listening, to think about questions you might have, because we'll have a big period of time after they've all presented to ask them questions. And so if you just put your questions in the chat, I'll be monitoring the questions, and we'll have an opportunity to ask those questions when we get to the end. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first panel member, Ben. Ben, can you tell us why, what it is you're doing? Tell us about the cool robotics work you're doing in Australia, and why is it that it's important that this work is done in Australia and not in other countries? Over to you, Ben. I think you're on mute.
Host has got on mute on this one. Thanks so much, John and Nikki, and g'day to everyone out there. My name is Ben Sorensen. I lead EPS Innovation as part of the EPS group of companies. We're based in Brisbane, and we're a defence and space SME, more at the M than the S end of things. Our purpose is to enable and protect people in hazardous environments, and robotics has got a very important role to play in that, obviously, for those people that are following closely in the industry. We have around 250 robots that we supply to defence and sustain them as well. So it's not just sale, but there's also a lot of through life support. To the I guess the debate question, Australia is the best place to do work in robotics. It's awesome to do work in robotics here. My background prior to this was with CSIRO's Data 61. Data 61 has a phenomenal robotics capability, and all around us are universities and increasingly SMEs that are delivering wonderful robotic capabilities. Just on this call, we've got ADR, Australian Jordan Robots, and Universal Field Robotics, awesome companies. ADR, congratulations, you guys are finalists in the Brisbane Lord Mayor's Business Awards. These are companies that are actually doing some wonderful work, building capability, supporting customers, and working to further the industry. I think the other bit about robotics in Australia is that it's not just robotics anymore. It's not just machines which you can control. It's robotics and autonomous systems. And it's not just RAS. It's actually RAS and also sensors. and mapping and all these other things that are coming along now. So the way that we look at these is they're complex integrations of robotics and other capabilities that we need to advance in partnership with our research collaborators and industry partners, OEMs, so that we can deliver new capabilities that are going to give competitive advantage to our customers. That's certainly the way that we focus from a defence perspective. On the defence side of things, our focus is enable and protect. We do a lot of work about explosive ordnance disposal and chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear protection. So from those types of threats, identifying, providing standoff detection and identification capabilities, and enabling experts in their fields to do their work without putting themselves into very hazardous environments. One of the other things we do with EPE is we operate, I think one of the largest, and I'm not sure if it's the only, but it's not the only, but a well-established ground and aerial robotics proving facility here in Brisbane. We have one site based at Vial where CSIRO is, and we've got another site about 100 kilometres west of Brisbane as well, where we can do NIST standards-based robotic operations to provide assurance around the operators, but also assurance around the platforms themselves. What else is it good here? I think it's great here in Australia because, as I mentioned, the university side of things, we've got this wonderful pool of talent that's coming out. I've got a team of engineers, mechatronics engineers that are all coming out of these great universities. I'm biased. I live in Queensland. I do think Queensland, Southeast Queensland in particular, is the centre of gravity for robotics in Australia. There's so much here. But we also lead in Australia generally, and this is an advantage for us because we're such a big place. We have so much remote places to operate, and we have so few people. So we are actually experts and growing in this, at that robotic operation in remote environments where we can't put people or where we don't have enough people, so that we're going to need to have robotics to help us there. We sort of think about platforms, perception, so the sensor side of things, processing and comms, and then the presentation layer, which is about how humans can interact with robots, that human-machine teaming part to create value. And that's about how do we augment humans and automate some things that are low value for humans and really accelerate the problem solving and the value delivery part that these robotic and autonomous systems and sensing capabilities, these complex systems, can provide for our customers and for society. I think just to talk about why Australia is a world leader, I'll point back to CSIRO. I was the lead for enterprise defence and national security, and I used to lead the DARPA CSIRO relationships. I'm not a scientist or an engineer. My job's to enable all the really smart people to do awesome work. I was in the weeds with the contracting, and I did have a little bit more hair then, but by the end of it, it's gone. But it is a recognised world leader, and that project was a collaboration with Australian companies and Georgia Tech as well. Came second overall and literally just missed out by a second in coming second overall. Absolutely world-leading technology. We're working with some of that technology, and some of the others I hear are doing some of that too, to help our customers to understand the environments when they're working with robots using 3D SLAM and other technologies, but also doing sensor data integration. It's not just about creating maps, it's actually understanding threats, understanding terrain, understanding traversability. And if you can do that, now that's the enabler then for the autonomy piece as we get into higher levels of capability around structured, semi-structured, and unstructured environments. That matters because of the different industries that Australia is strong in and needs to support, such as agriculture. So we've got SwarmFarm on here that deal with that stuff every day. Just remote environments generally, and wherever we can't easily put people.
Hey Ben, I reckon that's a great place to hold off there, because I think that's sort of pointing out a lot of what you do in space and a lot of how that connects. So if that's all right.
One more sentence, sorry, maybe two sentences, maybe a paragraph.
Okay. All right.
We're also leading a consortium for designing a lunar rover for Australia. There's two consortia that are doing this. Hi Tenzin, you're on there, and anyone else that's partnering in this. We've got this wonderful group of universities and SMEs that are designing what will be one of the two designs for Australia's first lunar rover. And it's going to be an Australian design thing. We're not taking technology from the US. We are taking knowledge. We've got some great partners that help us to understand space in a way that we don't understand it because we haven't done that work much in Australia. But we're doing all of that here, from designing 3D printed titanium wheels and testing all of these things in representative environments. And we want to take that tech built for space and apply it here for industries at the terrestrial level. Thank you.
Very cool. Thanks, Ben. All right. And so everybody remember that we're going to have a chance to ask Ben questions at the end. If you think anything that, and many things that Ben said that I think are quite interesting, let's get into that in the Q&A session. Next up, I'd like to ask Kate to take the floor. And so similar question for Kate. Tell us about what it is that you do in robotics. Tell us about how you do that in Australia, and why is it that Australia is uniquely positioned to do what you do?
Sure.
You, Kate.
I brought slides. Let's go.
Nice.
My name's Kate and I'm from Universal Field Robots. Before I start, quick thanks to Nikki and John for the chance to speak on this panel. And I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people whose land in which I reside, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. As I said, my name's Kate. I'm one of the robotics engineers at UFR. There's a wealth of knowledge on this panel, so I'm keen to share my perspective on what makes a successful robotics business as one of the boots on the ground or coders in the chair at UFR. Speaking of UFR, wouldn't be here today without our founder and glorious leader, Jeff Sterling. Jeff had 30 years experience in the mining sector before starting UFR back in 2015. And he did so on the belief that he could make robots that would make people's lives better. Fast forward to now, and we have 50 people deployed products in 3 continents. To understand how we did this in 8 short years, I'll talk about a few of our products and how being in Australia has helped our company grow. Let's start with mining. Australians are known as the early innovators and adopters in the mining space. For example, did you know we've had autonomous haul trucks for 15 years? If I was a kid, they'd be in grade 10 right now, going through their angsty teenage phase. It's practically a mature technology at this point. Adding on to that, we have some of the most stringent safety regulations worldwide, and we have a really high social license to operate. The Australian people have a voice, and we take miners to task when they aren't living up to our values. All of this culminates in a mining sector that funds research and adopts new technologies. One such piece of tech is UFR Autolog. This is a collaboration with our partner IMDEX Pty Ltd, and they're another great Aussie tech company listed on the ASX. IMDEX's business is helping miners understand what's in the ground before they blow it up. And they do this by getting sensors and winching them down blast holes. Now, that's a pretty manual process, and an operator might be able to cover 500 meters per shift. Enter Autolog. It places that sensor on the end of a robot that drives around and autonomously log holes, hence the name. And Autolog is 4 times more efficient than a manual operator. Autolog is near and dear to our hearts at UFR because it quite literally put us on the map. We've deployed Autologs all across Australia and as far away as Chile. If IMDEX weren't interested in improving their product's use, if mining companies weren't interested in adopting new technologies, UFR would have had a very different trajectory and we wouldn't be where we are today. But it's not just mining that likes innovation. Australia as a society has had a long history of innovation, and it's something that we're really proud of. In fact, it's so important to us that there's multiple public and private schemes in Australia that recognize, nurture, and reward innovation. And UFR's benefited from a lot of these: incubators, hackathons, awards and grants. And I can safely say every other company on this panel feels the same way. One example of us benefiting from UFR's appetite for innovation is UFR Whole Prep. This is a METS Ignited initiative. METS being a government, organization? Government organization who support the mining equipment, technologies, and services sectors. We also are collaborating with IMDEX and Goldfields Australia. Our Autolog product went so well that we were asked if we could do it again, but underground. We went one step further with Whole Prep. Traditionally underground, before you can log a hole, you've got to clean it out. And an operator does this by sending tools up there, getting covered in all the dirt, dust, rocks in the process. This is actually a really dangerous job because caves have unstable ceilings and this can lead to cave-ins. Hole prep removes that problem by taking the operator out of that environment and preps the hole and surveys it on its own. The Met's Ignited funding was crucial in the development of hole prep for UFR, and it also added legitimacy. I love legitimacy. It's such a hard word to say, legitimacy. It adds legitimacy to hole prep as a product and to UFR as a player in the underground mining space. Another one of the initiatives that UFR's benefited from in Australia is Defence Innovation Projects. The Advanced Strategic Capability Accelerator, or ASCA, is run by the Department of Defence, and it is a game changer for small to medium enterprises in the defence space. It can take decades traditionally from development to acquisition for a defence product. It's a time-intensive, expensive, bureaucratic process that drives people up the wall and really stops small players from getting involved in this market. ASCA turns that on its head. It provides partnership, funding, resources, and removes that red tape. You can be developing a product 1 year, and you can have it in the field testing the next. One of our defense projects is the Automated Resupply Manual Handling System. I know it's a mouthful, I didn't name it. We call it RMS. And this is a collaboration between UFR and Eclipse Logistics. As an aside, I swear we do solo projects, but if you're a small player in the market or a startup, collaborative projects are a really great way to gain exposure while mitigating risk. Anyway, back to RMS. RMS is an autonomous shell loader. It loads 155 mil ammo into the K-10 resupply vehicle. Normally you'd have a soldier doing this, but each shell is about 50 kilos and they're really smooth and hard to handle. This has led to a lot of injuries and dropped shells. And every time you drop a shell that size, you need to get the bomb squad in to dispose of that bad boy. It's just not usable. RMS makes those problems just go away by handling the shells itself. It speeds up the process, mitigates explosion risks, and removes soldiers so they can do other things. And we haven't had anybody complain about not carrying the heavy, bulky thing yet. It sounds like a win all round. Without ASCA, UFR would have never considered moving into the defense market. Yet here we are with multiple defense projects that are well on their way to being acquisitions. If I had to talk about how being in Australia has helped our robotics company, I would have talked about the wealth of government support, our early and eager mining sector, the defense project pathways, and more broadly, how our society values and rewards innovation. I hope that you've enjoyed hearing about some of the cool stuff we do at UFR. It helps if I say the company name, right? And that I've shed some on the robotics industry as a whole. And that's all for me. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. That's really cool. That was a really cool view of all the different projects that you're doing. I think I've certainly learned a lot. I'd like to next bring up, perhaps I'd like to get Andrew ready to come up and talk about the cool work that he's doing. And the same questions. Tell us about yourself. Tell us what you do and why is it that is really can only really be done in Australia. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks very much for having me on today. My name's Andrew Bate, co-founder of SwarmFarm Robotics. Behind that, I'm also a farmer. A little bit of background on myself, grew up on a farm, still farm today. We grow wheat, chickpeas, sorghum, mung beans, run beef cattle as well. And we also started a robotic company as well. I'm kind of not your typical tech startup founder. I don't wear a black t-shirt. I don't ride an electric scooter to work. I'm just a farmer that wanted to farm better and kind of had a vision that I wanted to see through. And that's how SwarmFarm Robotics started. And it's probably interesting because it's an ethos behind the company today. We farmed best practice ourselves. We were kind of leaders in what we're doing in our farming operation. And SwarmFarm formed from this desire to be better farmers. How could we farm more sustainably? How could we grow better yielding crops? How could we help prevent soil erosion and runoff of nutrients and pesticides? How could we use fertilizer more efficiently? And ultimately, how could we care for our land better? And so many people thought about robotics and agriculture about, I could automate that task. I could make a driverless tractor. I could save labor. Whereas we started out with the far bigger view and and kind of a vision that we wanted to achieve. And that's been the ethos behind the company to today. Pretty interesting. We started way back in 2010, and it's been a really amazing learning journey. I didn't probably know what a startup was. We didn't know what we were when we started. We kind of just had this idea we were following. We partnered with universities. We built our first prototypes, learned how to build software development teams, learned how to build our product technology roadmap. I'm a mad tinkerer in my shed. I'm always building things, and whether it's welding them together, electrical stuff, mechanical stuff, I've got a pretty inquiring mind. And that's kind of how we started out. One of the unique things about us too is we're a deep tech company based out in rural Australia. And when I say rural, we're out at Emerald in central Queensland. So we're a good 700, 800 kilometres from Brisbane. And that's a little bit unique about us as well. When we started, there was plenty of people said, you can't start a high-tech company out there. You need to be in the capital city. And we said, well, I don't know any farmers that farm in the middle of Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne. Actually, all of our customers are out here. And so we just formed our company out here. And we're really proud of what we've achieved. Fast forward to today, we're a team of around 40 people now, and we're recruiting more and more people into our team and growing. We've delivered around, I think it's 80 robots to the Australian market now. We're one of the few companies globally that's truly delivering autonomous technology to farmers, and really proud of what our little team's developed. We've done around 2 million acres of farmland now. So as in our customers, with genuine hand over the keys robots, have done around 2 million acres of operations with our robots. It's around 115,000 operating hours. And part of testament to why we started in the first place, across our customers, I think they've saved around 2 million litres of pesticide now. So that's 2 million litres of pesticide that would have been used in the environment. This hasn't been used since we started this company. And it's been interesting. It took us, I guess all the way from when we started to last year to get our first 1 million acres under our belt. We clocked 1 million acres in just over 1 million acres in the last 12 months. So I guess the hockey stick in what we're doing is pretty exciting now, and the impact we're having, and those litres of pesticide we're taking out of the environment are really starting to add up now, which is really exciting from a personal point of view and the success of the company. We're an end-to-end company, so we do everything in-house. So we've built all our own software stack, all of our own autonomy from navigation, perception, path planning. Obviously, we set up all our back-end servers and all of the things that happen up in the cloud. We release our own apps onto the App Store that our customers use to put our robots to work. We design, prototype, CAD up, build, break, test our prototypes. We manufacture now. So we're very proud that we're an Australian manufacturer. When we started, manufacturing was a dirty word. Now it's a cool word that people want to hear. So we're pretty proud of that as well, that we manufacture our robots in-house. We sell them direct, and we also support them to end of life. So a lot of other companies only do one thing of what we do. We are absolutely end-to-end all the way through in what we do. And it's been interesting for us, as a regional ag tech company. We've grown, so now we have an office in Harden in New South Wales, a little country town out near between Young and out towards Wagga there in New South Wales. And we have a base there now with the team. We have a base in Toowoomba now. We have a lot of customers in the southern Queensland region. We have an office in Sydney as well now. So as we have more developers, some of them have moved back to Sydney and set up in Sydney. So we're deploying more and more people in those areas as well. And we've just delivered our first robot to the US. So that's pretty exciting for us at the very minute, getting the first machine over there. But look, I think it's been so rewarding being a regional tech startup. And, people talk about having remote workers. I always say, well, we're kind of reverse remote. We were kind of remote from the first place. So, it's been interesting for us, having to get 2 connecting flights for a simple meeting, coffee meeting, whenever other people can take that stuff for granted. But if you look at, why Australia and what's so special about building robotics in Australia, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, we were very lucky that a lot of work was done with the mining industry that was referred to earlier, and we got some great expertise and experience in this country, and certainly that helped in our early days with some of the expertise and the learnings and connections we're able to make in our early days of starting SwarmFarm. But in terms of an agricultural perspective, we're the driest island continent in the world. We have the most variable climate. We've got some of the most ancient rundown soils in the world. But I think the really exciting thing is none of our farmers are subsidised. So if you live in the US or Canada, or if you live in Europe, every year the government writes you a cheque as a farmer to keep farming. And those checks are linked to things that aren't commercially linked to producing food. They're linked to US subsidies or EU subsidies. So overseas farmers live a world where they don't genuinely have to innovate. They farm a subsidy, not a real commodity. In Australia, we stand on our own feet. And like I said, we farm in this dry island continent with the most variable climate, with these crappy soils. And if we don't grow good crops, if we're not efficient farmers, we go broke and we go out of business. We no longer exist. And I think as Australian farmers, we stand really proud of that, because we have to innovate. We have to do the right things. We have to be efficient. And that drives innovation, and that drives acceptance and new ideas. And that drives sustainability in what people do. And I think it's been really interesting that, I think there's more agricultural robot activity in Australia than any other country, in my opinion, particularly with genuine commercial adoption. And, historically, all agricultural manufacturers generally send their equipment to Australia to see if Australian farmers can break it before they release it on the Australian market, because we have this really tough operating environment. So I think we're actually blessed to be here in Australia. And I think it's part of the strength we have. And I think we have this real opportunity to grow this export industry out of this country. So often we talk about export industry of minerals, materials, maybe it's manufacturing, but the IP and also all the technology we're developing is an entire new export industry out of this country. And we've got a genuine advantage in getting this to market. So I'm pretty excited about that. And the last thing I'd have to finish with just quickly is say we've got great support here. And, particularly from an industry, we've had support from the cotton industry. We've had support from the horticulture industry. We've had support from the cotton and the grains industry. And, that's innovative Australian industry bodies getting behind us, who are taking a risk on a technology company to actually see a vision through and deliver it to farmers that makes a difference. And so, we're really thankful that we've had that sort of support.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. That's really cool. A genuine advantage in Australia is pretty cool. I often think we're up against it, but it's cool to see. It's cool to see like companies like yourself thriving and really doing well. All right, and everybody, don't forget that if you want to ask questions to any of our speakers, you can just put them in the chat. Although of course you can wait till the end, but you can put it in the chat. You might get in the front of the queue. And finally, I'd like to hand over to Joe. So Joe, everybody knows the spiel, but tell us, what is it that you do? Tell us about the robots that you're making and in Australia, and how Australia is the best place for that.
Joe, you
I think you're on mute.
Unmute. I've asked there.
No, how's that? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Fantastic. Firstly, thanks so much to RAG for the opportunity. I think RAG plays a very important role, and I think RAG is going to play an increasingly important role in the next 5 to 10 years. Australia is interesting. We are passionate about robotics, and we have great depth in robotics. And as Kate mentioned, we go back a long way. Yes, Kate, there were haul trucks 15 years ago, but even before that, there were autonomous LHDs running around in underground mines. And I was very fortunate to be part of that. And I think one thing we do well in Australia is we build on what went before. And we had great success. Our company was involved in a number of underground automation projects around the world. And that could only have happened because of the work that CSIRO and ACFR did way back in developing that autonomy. And I think that now we're buying some of this in, and we really need to go back to where we were exporting that to the world. And I think we're seeing a bit of a turning point now with the National Robotics Strategy, the National Reconstruction Fund. And I've said while we were chatting before the meeting that this is a great time, and we've got a great industry, and I would back Southeast Queensland again. We have a very strong robotics industry in Southeast Queensland that goes from strength to strength. But that industry needs an advocate, and I think RAG is going to play an increasingly strong role in that. Australia's a big space. It's a really big place. When you look at Australia as a map to the rest of the world, we're massive. It's absolutely huge. Enormous coastline, large areas of uninhabited terrain where stuff happens. And we've got a greater demand, I believe, with our mining industry, the agriculture, defence, our coastline, the SES looking for people, and as climate change affects us, recovering after disasters and situational awareness, that we have greater demand in this country for robotics than any other country on the planet, and we should be building an industry and we should be exporting. That's a bit of a rant. Australian Droid and Robot started a kilometre underground when we'd automated North Parks and production was fully automated. But then we had to shut production down to send people into the automated area to take measurements, to look at issues and other inspection tasks. And we saw that there was a role for smaller robots to go in and get that data remotely. So I'll quickly share, I don't know if this will work, a bit of a presentation. Yes, can you see that?
Yep, we can see that.
Yeah, great. So ADR, our mission is to create an integrated platform with robotics and data storage and analytics where we can acquire data seamlessly for our customers, production data and regulatory data, and provide insights into that data so that they don't have to send people into those hazardous environments, and they can do it more efficiently and more regularly. And what drives that now, particularly in the mining industry, which is where we specialise, that's what's driving us at the moment, because our customers within those industries are recognising that safety and profitability are going to be driven by robotics and automation, particularly as the race for renewable energy minerals heats up and we're beginning to mine in more remote places and we're going deeper in mines. We're seeing more hazards and also less people are going into mining and there's a real skills shortage coming up. So that's the space we're working in, and that's what's driving our technology. But the same technology can be used in the defence industry, in construction and in infrastructure inspection. And we've got robots doing all of those things around Australia and a couple overseas. What's interesting is we started in the underground mining environment, which is, the water's acidic, the fines from the drilling, the very small talcum-like particles are very sharp and very abrasive. And, some mining companies have taken defence robots underground and they've lasted about a week. On the other side, we've got our robots now with the Australian Army, and one robot has already lasted 2 months, which is almost a record for them because they're very harsh on their toys. But it just shows that underground environment and what we develop for mining in Australia is a dual-use technology that can be used around other industries. So where we sit is we're building a conduit between sensors and the people that need the data in harsh and remote environments. Our platforms are sensor agnostic. They're Ethernet based. We provide the communications, the interface. We've got compute on the edge. We can do some analytics on the edge. But ultimately, where we fit in is we've got the robots and the sensors and a back end. So all that data can come straight from wherever it is, whichever environment it's in, into a back end where the analytics can be done immediately. The data is available for engineers, or even third-party providers can go into that data and provide additional value in some insights for the customers. So that's really what we are, who we are, and I'll stop sharing and where we've come from. And very proud to be part of the robotics industry in Australia, and can really see that we can build quite an incredible export industry with the talent and the capability we've got, and the business case within Australia that we've got to fund that industry. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Joe. That was really cool. Yeah, actually, I've got some questions for you now, but I think we've got a few questions in the chat. And so let's get into it. So the first question appears to be for Andrew. And so Jack here mentioned, we have this very low subsidy level. And I suppose that the real question is like, what do you want to see the government doing to support Australian farmers? Andrew, what do you think they should do?
Actually, it's a good question. I think what would be really helpful is de-risking new technology. I mean, if we're going to be cutting edge farmers, if we're going to export our technology to the world, if our farmers are going to be leading farmers around the world, they need to take risks, try new technology, improve it. And that's the hard bit, right? Because, your income is dependent on the weather and crop prices and exchange rates and all that things as a farmer. So if there was one thing I think government could do to help would be, incentives or maybe tax kind of write-offs or something like that for farmers that are trying new technology to actually take the risk to try and improve something that may involve risk or unknown outcomes. Because sometimes, something even looks close to being useful, but if it doesn't rain, you don't get any more income for another 2 years till you have your next season. So those sort of things are probably good proactive things where farmers can test and adopt new technology. It helps companies like us, for people who are adopting new technology, whether it's something to do with carbon sequestration, whether it's robotics that we do, whether it's something to do with fertilizer or soil biology. Those sort of things can be great incentives, I think, that don't actually subsidise a farmer, but actually subsidise their ability to try a new technology on their farm, if you understand what I'm saying, in terms of how it's actually put to an industry and the effect it has.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think maybe we need to get on that with the government and let them know that that's what they should do. Yeah. All right, next question. There's a question about robotics and skills looking for in a workforce, but I think I might sort of veer this towards Kate, as Kate is our panel member who's a bit earlier in her career. And Kate, what are the skills that you think you've most benefited from as an early career person in robotics industry? What do you, if you were to tell someone who was thinking about robotics, what they should be, making sure they can do, what would you say to them, like someone who's like early in their university career?
Hello, I'm back. What skills we look for people when joining UFR. As a robotics engineer, the biggest thing I didn't learn at uni would have been the ROS2 framework, as that is the core of our software stack and of a lot of the software stacks around the country and worldwide. But code can be taught, skills can be taught. The most important thing we look for is a cultural fit. If you are eager, if you are honest, and if you aren't afraid to fail and ask for help so we can help you succeed, you're going to go a long way, not just at UFR, but in life as whole. That's what we look for. That's
really cool. It's just like a mindset thing. You have to have the tech skills, but you've got to be willing. Awesome. All right. Well, moving on to the next question. I suppose this is just another one from Jack. I suppose this is around barriers to adoption of autonomous systems in mining. What's your perspectives given the history? Do you think this is easier than some other systems? What are the barriers? I think the question here is, what are the barriers to entry for adopting robotics in the mining industry?
Oh, I might take that one. I think the thing for me is, Australia really did lead the way. We absolutely led the way, and we let that technology to a certain extent. What Australia is very good at is showing what can be done, but we're not very good as a country in supporting that and getting it to the world. And I think we're early adopters, and then the bigger companies in the US and Europe then see the value, and then they invest in it, and their governments invest in it. I think we need a new cycle where the new generation of robotics is coming in, and we call it manufacturing 4 or even mining 4 is coming. And we really need to invest in those technologies that will deliver the profitability and the safety dividends in mining. But we need to make sure that we build an industry around it. And what Australia is not very good at is taking research and building industry around it. And I think that may be changing, and I'm very hopeful that it is changing. I'm certainly recognition that we need sovereign capability, but it's more than sovereign capability. Australia can be a very small market and a very slow market. The world is a great big place. And I think the strategy is not about just building industry that sells to Australia. It's about building an export industry where Australia gets the benefit. And I think that's the fundamental piece that needs to change.
Just to add to that, I was going to say, so often in this country, we talk about R&D and then we talk about C for commercialisation, and we keep dumping R&D together. But research is not development, and we shouldn't lump them in the same thing. They're a totally separate thing. Research organisations like universities, CSIRO, do research, discoveries new to science that can be published, that sort of thing, but they don't develop research through to something that can be commercialised. That's what technology companies do. And before something be commercialised, it needs to be developed, tested, field hardened, all these things before it can be commercialised. And then once that's done, the work's done, it becomes a commercial product and it gets commercialized. And I think too often these conversations about talk about R&D research are really just research, and we're not doing the development. And that big D is the bit that misses all the time, and why industry fails sometimes to capitalize on the success that we have from research.
Definitely. I feel like it's also harkens back to your point of like de-risking technology, not just in agriculture, but perhaps more broadly across the key industries Australia's in. We need to help to de-risk technology so that people can adopt it and that we can export it.
In Australia, a lot of the risk is put on the industry. We've got a fundamental challenge of size in Australia. So we're not a massive market. And unlike America or Europe, you can't just sort of step across a border and go and transact. We're a long way away. So one of the challenges is that tyranny of distance for other markets. And there's that scale piece to make sure that we can actually get to the economies of scale so that it makes sense for us, so that other markets get that. It's tricky, but I think it's surmountable. I do encourage more investment by governments. That's always good. They've got to pick winners. And robotics is one of those things that can actually amplify outcomes. It's not going to put people out of jobs. It actually creates more jobs, creates technician jobs and other things. Like we've got more technicians here than we've got mechatronics engineers. That's important. I'd like to add that some of the other challenges, skills and capabilities, cyber assurance. ROS is an open source piece of code. It's not just one piece of code. There's heaps of other bits of it. And then you've got proprietary software. What assurance do you have about who's written that and if it is clean and cyber assured, and in particular when it's complex robotics and sensor integrations? I think we're going to need more of that capability, not to be an expert at it as a mechatronics engineer, but really an understanding of the risks and how to actually provide that assurance. We also need to do that, not just pen testing, we need AI and other tools to do that at scale. There was another point that I wanted to say, which is, that's about how do we get adoption. The other bit is getting robotic ubiquity. Like we need to find ways to do faster things, cheaper. We can do that. Like we can do it. If you set that as a design constraint on certain things, you'll get there. We can get there. And that helps us to compete internationally. And it helps us to move towards ubiquity of robotics and adoption and more of that confidence for people to adopt and take the risk.
Nice. I think we've kind of answered. There's a few questions around commercialization and blockades, and I think with that discussion that we've answered them. I've got a quick question from Marie here. She doesn't know what ROS2 is, and I guess this is really technical. She wants to know, what is the best language to teach a student who wants to be in robotics? Does anybody have any there's usually strong opinions on this question, but
Mandarin.
I'm happy to take this one.
You got it.
ROS2, the main languages it runs is C++, which is what we use at UFR, but it also does Python. I'd recommend starting with Python as the first language for students because it's a lot easier to read and execute. You don't need to compile it. It's a great jumping off point. And then they can move to other languages as they so please. Hope that helps.
Very good. I've got a question. And it's just, imagine, and this is sort of generally to the panel, but because we've got quite a lot of business people here, how do you think you should get started in robotics if you have a entrepreneurial bent and maybe you know a bit about robotics, so you can build robots, but you're unsure where to start? There's mining places, there's agriculture, there's lots of things. What would your advice be to someone who wants to get into building robots in Australia?
Find the problem. Everyone wants to build robots. I love building robots. I'm not allowed to build robots anymore. Other people do that. But yeah, the real thing is to find the pain point that's going to deliver either the safety dividend, the productivity dividend, or the efficiency dividend, or even enable companies to create value in areas they haven't been able to do it in the past. Find the problem. And then develop the solution. Don't be a solution looking for the problem.
For sure. Does anybody else want to, there's a lot of other experience in the room, does anybody else want to have a crack at that?
I've always been a believer that the world belongs to those that turn up, have a go. If it's something that's burning and you want to do it, it takes courage and I guess determination to turn up and have a go, but nothing ever happened for those that didn't turn up. And I look back at my own journey, and my job was, as a farmer, was riding horses, mustering cattle, driving tractors. It wasn't my world in robotics, and and coding and all the things I do now. And it didn't happen because I sat there and talked about it. I guess I just got up and had a go and worked it out. And I think that's the one thing is get out, have a go, be game to fail.
All right, so we're getting close to time. So we probably have time for one more question. Does anybody want to? All right, we'll grab Nicola's just jumped in here with, do you see similar problems or crossovers with industries? I suppose, where do you see the biggest crossovers, the biggest problems that are jointly related to say different industries? Oh, Ben, you already answered it.
Oh, did I? Sorry. Let's just tell you what, I think standards are a challenge, but standards are an enabler. I think we're the only NIST standard proctoring in the Southern Hemisphere. It's about operators and it's about platforms. And we need more assurance around that. Assurance leads to confidence, leads to adoption. Insurance, I think, is one of those things which actually grows business too, because it's about protecting the downside. I think just to go back to something that Andrew said about businesses and adoption and stuff like that, we want to capture the upside risk. So robotics and innovation helps us understand and capture upside risk. Our challenge in Australia is we are actually a pretty risk-averse country corporately, and our companies are generally risk-based companies which focus on protecting the downside risk, but they often do that to the exclusion of that. That's a big problem from a corporate culture perspective, helping people to understand that, what the benefits are, how to do that, but also providing that insurance piece, the standards piece, that's the protection that helps us on the downside. We need to do more of that. And some of those standards just need to be built as we go along.
Awesome. Really, you're saying we should change the way that we work. We should start to try and be more risk taking, or at least have standards that allow us to.
Risk is a state of mind. If it's your money and you're risking it, that's really important. We all make bets. Here's one about grants. If we don't do any R&D, or if we don't do any investment unless somebody will pay us for it, we're making a bet that somebody will pay us for that before we actually do it. What we're betting is our time. You can never get your time back. We're in a competitive environment. Australia is an island, but it is not an island in the global environment. There's another bet that you can make at the same time, which is to do that investment and to do your internal R&D. We've got several companies on this call, several speakers that do that, and they do it really well. And it's hard because they're small businesses too. We need to support that internal R&D, and that's through partnership and collaboration, because the bet then is that you can make something of what you're making and you're not losing your time, and we can keep competing and creating the jobs and opportunities out of that. Tricky trade-offs, and it's hard to figure out what's the right bet. But do nothing is not the way.
Definitely agreed. All right. Well, with that, I think we need to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody. Thank you so much for your time. And I think I need to hand over to Nikki to do the official closeout. But thanks everybody for your questions. Sorry I won't be able to get to them. And over to you, Nikki.
John, thank you very much for your excellent moderation, and to our speakers again, thank you very much for making your time available. I know you're all busy, and I thank you for your participation, the trouble you took to be here today. Our next webinar is on the 25th of October, and it will be on care robots. So the link is already out there, more information about the speakers to follow. As John mentioned, we are the peak body for robotics in Australia. We're the not-for-profit organisation. So if any of you are thinking of supporting our work, please feel free to contact me. I'm very happy to talk to you about membership options. If you're struggling, I can cut special deals. I have the power to do this, but we want companies to support our work, and we want you on the journey, more importantly. So with that, I think that's the end of our time. 1 minute to go. So enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in Australia or in the world. And we look forward to you at our next webinar. Cheers, everyone.